Welcome to the Clear Ground Show. I'm your host, Dr. G, with a PhD. We've got a lot of news to go over today. To start with, we're going to talk about a lot of COVID news. We're going to go from Austria to Gibraltar to here at home and everywhere in between, talking about the latest in politics for COVID and in mandates. From COVID, we're going to talk about a brand new publication that discusses a new therapy and ultimately treatment for Alzheimer's. It looks really promising and really cool. We'll break down that study for you guys. Then from Alzheimer's to HIV with a brand new report discussing a very rare polymorphism that actually helps a person fight off HIV naturally. We're going to talk about what that means for the population of people with HIV and what that means for potential cures. And finally, before wrapping everything up, we're going to talk about solar panels and nuclear energy just briefly, and a new story that came out of China and their mountains of solar panels. So without further ado, let's dive on in. So we'll start today off talking about Austria, who on Monday took one of the most drastic steps of any European nation to curb the rising COVID cases in Europe. They are implementing a mandatory lockdown on unvaccinated persons in Austria who have not recently tested positive for COVID-19. Now let's watch that declaration from the Austrian Chancellor in a video that the New York Times posted.
In Österreich ein Lockdown für Ungeimpfte gilt. Das bedeutet Ausgangsbeschränkungen für alle ab dem 12. Lebensjahr. Der private Wohnbereich darf nur noch in Ausnahmefällen verlassen werden. Es gilt künftig im Handel 2G, beim Handel, der über die Grundversorgung hinausgeht, also der Besuch von Bekleidungsgeschäften, Sportgeschäften, Möbelhäusern oder anderes ist nicht mehr gestattet.
Darauf wurde ein Konzept ausgearbeitet, das ein noch nie in diesem Umfang dagewesenes Kontrollieren ermöglichen wird. Warum? Ab morgen muss jede Bürgerin, jeder Bürger, jeder Mensch, der in Österreich lebt, sich klar sein, dass er von der Polizei kontrolliert werden kann. Denn wir werden in all unseren Kontrollmaßnahmen, die wir polizeilich durchzuführen haben, auch den 2G-Status kontrollieren, auch den Grund des Betreten des öffentlichen Raumes kontrollieren.
How 1933 of you, Austria. So while I discuss some of the statistics from Austria and some of the implementations of this plan, I'll have footage showing the Austrian police checking random citizens in shopping malls and in their cars for their COVID passports. The news I'm about to convey is coming from Berlin, the Berlin AP. The lockdown is going to be imposed at least initially until November 24th. Now, it doesn't apply to children under 12 because they can't get vaccinated. That being said, they are already reporting a pilot project to vaccinate under 12-year-old patients, and it is reportedly showing high demand in the country. Austria has a population of about 8.9 million people, and this lockdown could potentially impact up to 2 million of the population. According to officials, the police patrols are going to be stepped up, so there's going to be more police patrolling the streets and other locations, and the unvaccinated people who are found out and about can be fined up to 1,450 euros, which is approximately $1,660 US. As of Monday, Austria recorded 894.3 new cases per 100,000 residents, and that was the 7-day average. So Germany, a neighboring country, set its own pandemic record at around 303 new cases per 100,000 over the last 7 days. So Austria is faring significantly worse than Germany in terms of number of cases. The Austrian Chancellor believes that vaccination is the only way out of this pandemic, and now I quote from the Chancellor himself. My aim is very clearly to get the unvaccinated to get themselves vaccinated and not to lock down the vaccinated. In the long term, the way out of this vicious circle we are in, and it is a vicious circle, we are stumbling from wave to lockdown, and that cannot carry on ad infinitum, is only vaccination. Well, he's probably not going to like what's happening in Gibraltar. It looks like Gibraltar may be having to cancel Christmas. In a statement released by the government of Gibraltar on November 12th, a rise in active COVID-19 cases, the public are urged to be cautious and reduce mixing. So, first of all, Gibraltar is a relatively small country with a population as of 2020 at around 34,000 people. Now, the first thing we should look at from this government document is the number of cases. So according to the document, there were 359 active cases of COVID-19 in Gibraltar on November 12th. 57 new cases that day, 72 the day before, 5 hospitalizations, one of which is in the CCU, and a total of 440 persons in isolation. So moving on to some of their implications, given the exponential rise in the number of cases, the government, for example, intends to cancel a number of its own functions, including official Christmas parties, official receptions, and similar gatherings. And in terms of the government's recommendations to the population, the government strongly advises against any large informal social events, parties, or receptions being held over at least the next 4 weeks while the vaccine booster program is rolled out. It will also become necessary at this point to make sure that the use of official premises is carefully scrutinized and where necessary, events are postponed to a later date. So they're just strongly advising not to have Christmas. Okay, well, what about the vaccination rate? This is where it starts to get really interesting. And by the way, we're getting all of our numbers from the Reuters COVID-19 tracker, the global one, and they basically track COVID, vaccinations, and other stats regarding the pandemic. So according to Reuters, as of November 14th, Gibraltar has administered at least 94,019 doses of COVID vaccines so far. Assuming every person needs 2 doses, that's enough to have vaccinated about 139.5% of the country's population. So I've been harping on this point for a few months now, and that is that vaccination is not the way out of this pandemic. As a matter of fact, the way out of this pandemic, at least policy-wise, is up to the people. The people can just say, I've had it with these lockdowns, and not abide by them. I think we're going to continue to see spikes and wanes in COVID cases, especially now that we're many mutations into this COVID thing, and the vaccines are still the original concoctions from early 2021 in January, which is the emergency use authorization concoction. That's the exact same one that's in your booster. So the further the mutation gets away from that variation, the original variation, the less effective the vaccine is going to be. It's kind of the same reason why you get a new flu booster or new flu vaccine every year, right? That flu vaccine is a new formulation of all the potential flu viruses that are out there in the next given year. It's usually 25% to 40% effective. We never mandate it. And there you go. We live life as normal. COVID's going to have to become the same thing. Now, it would be great if we could actually have these discussions in the US, in the public square, with reasonable conversation on both sides to come to a reasonable conclusion. Unfortunately, we can't. And let's take this clip from The View just to point out how absurd the conversation has gotten here.
But the vaccine does not prevent you from getting COVID and does not prevent you from transmitting COVID.
Oh, my goodness.
Reality, and
No,
we have
that's
seen that.
not so. Come on.
No,
You've been at Fox TV
you
too
don't have
long.
to, Joy, you don't have to listen to me on that. You don't have to listen to me. You can listen to the director of the CDC. You can look at the CDC's website. That is why masks were reinstated for people who were vaccinated, because they said, and they admitted, they came out and said, for this Delta variant, transmission is going to be a thing for vaccinated and unvaccinated people. So I'm not opposed to the vaccine, but I am opposed to the mandate 100% on the grounds of science.
People have died from COVID, including Manny's in-laws. And we've been friends a long time, but Manny's parents.
It's an incredible clip, and it goes on for about 3 minutes. It's linked down in the description if you guys want to watch. But here's the crux of the issue. You can come up with facts from the CDC's website, from what the CDC director said. You can present them, and if the receiving audience is already in their zone of whatever camp they're going to be in that's against your camp, they won't listen to it. They won't even entertain it. They're going to jump straight to, well, 800,000 people have died, 700,000 people have died. Your argument is invalid, not because I'm going to hear it, just because of this number I'm going to pull out. This is where the conversation is at the public square and at the top level. I'm hopeful that it's not that way down at our level where we're talking to our friends and our family, but it might be, and this is no way to get anywhere. We have to be able to look objectively at certain facts and then make some assessments off of them. And so this is just a microcosm of how the debate and the talk is happening about COVID in the US, and it leads to situations just like this doctor from Houston. So we've seen stories like this happen all across the country, and I'm going to focus in on this one because it just is breaking news. But this has happened everywhere. Now, this is the case of Dr. Bowden. She is a Houston area physician that focuses on ears, nose, and throat. She worked with the Methodist Hospital up until very recently, and she resigned her position at Methodist after being temporarily suspended for spreading, quote, misinformation about COVID-19. I'm reporting now from CNN affiliate CB58. On Friday, Houston Methodist announced that they had suspended Bowden's privileges after she posted harmful and dangerous misinformation about COVID-19 and its treatments on social media, according to the hospital. You might be wondering, what's an example of this misinformation? Well, let's look at one of her tweets from November 10th, 2021. She said, "Imagine that your 48-year-old husband, the father of your 6 children, is dying in the ICU, and the doctors would rather have him die than try ivermectin." Now, from all the studies I've seen where ivermectin has shown some signs of clinical significance have been early on in COVID, so before you get to the ICU. But her point is valid in a sort of medical sense in that, look, this guy is very, very ill. He's most likely going to die. Why not try some interventions? And that's a valid point and at least should be open to debate and open to consideration. Science is all about finding the truth in things. And so if that's a particular avenue that might work, it should be explored, or it should at least be allowed to be explored. But Methodists said no. This kind of inquiry, by the way, before moving on, is how scientists came to the conclusion that fluvoxamine looks pretty promising as a treatment against COVID, and that's $4 for a full pack of treatment for patients. So that's excellent. This kind of conversation needs to continue, and this stifling by hospitals like Methodist stops the conversation. Now back to the story. So Bowden's attorney, Stephen Mitby, says that the doctor has treated more than 2,000 patients in her private practice, and that none of them have ended up in the hospital. That's not exactly an endorsement that ivermectin is the drug to cure the cure-all from COVID, but that is to say that she at least has a history and a record of treating COVID patients, and none of them became severely ill. That's not nothing. Now, one of my favorite parts of this story comes here towards the end, where they say, Dr. Bowden is not anti-vaccine. She believes people should have a choice. Now, I wish they would say anti-COVID vaccine, because there's a lot of people that have the entire regimen of vaccinations. They're fully vaccinated when they were kids. They get their flu vaccine every year, and they don't have the COVID vaccine. That's not anti-vaccine. That's anti-one vaccine. And that's that's a distinction that's important. But furthermore, Dr. Bowden is vaccinated. It was mandated by the hospital for all physicians who work at Methodist to be vaccinated in June. So Dr. Bowden looked at the science. She made a risk-based calculation for herself, and that was to get the vaccine. And then she treated patients. This seems like a open and shut case. So it's just, it's really disturbing that conversations cannot be had right now, it seems like, on any level approaching policy without just diving straight into our camps. We need to get out of that, and that's the only way we're going to move forward out of COVID. Moving on to some non-COVID scientific news. First, we'll start off with this Alzheimer's treatment. So Alzheimer's disease has been a particularly hard disease to fight in the last couple of decades, and that's because of the way the disease works. It deposits these amyloid beta proteins in amyloid plaques in the brain, and they've been really hard to target and take out or remove, and these are what lead the patients to further and further decline in their mental capacity. So this new discovery is pretty exciting. Recently, researchers from the University Medical Center of Göttingen published a paper. The paper was titled Discovery of a Novel Pseudo-Beta Hairpin Structure of the N-Truncated Amyloid Beta for Use as Vaccine Against Alzheimer's Disease. Now that's kind of a mouthful of a paper, so I'm just going to give you some highlights, and if you want, you can go ahead and read the paper. I'll link it here in the description. So for starters, Alzheimer's disease is a neurodegenerative disease, and one of the main focuses of this disease is the amyloid beta protein. So amyloid beta proteins occur naturally. They're in your brains right now, and they're like this combination. It's like a stringy looking molecule if you were to see it in 3D. I'll put a picture up here right now. And so these molecules can join together, and they can form fibers, they can form plaques. Now, what's happening in Alzheimer's is it appears that a really large proportion of these amyloid beta proteins actually become shortened. It's called truncated. So they become truncated and they form these big plaques. The increased concentration of some of these truncated amyloid beta plaques seems to be correlated with an increase in degeneration from the disease. Now, the investigators note that this one truncated species isn't the only bad actor, but it's the one that they focus on in the study. So these researchers basically discovered a structure that hadn't yet before been seen in amyloid beta. And after discovering this structure, they were able to focus on a region of it and develop a protein to stabilize this hairpin shape. They then found that that hairpin shape binds to an antibody in a very similar way. And so their plan was to take this new shape and sort of try and trigger someone's immune system to make the antibodies that would help remove or target this shape. So the results were excellent in 2 different mouse models for Alzheimer's disease. So the vaccine led to reduction in amyloid plaque formation, a rescue of brain glucose metabolism, a stabilization in neuron loss, and a rescue of memory deficiencies. Treating both models with the humanized version of the antibody had similar effects. Now, the researchers note that the science is currently still obviously in the early stages, but if they were able to replicate this in human clinical trials, it could be a total game changer in the Alzheimer's disease fight. And I'm hopeful that that's the case, and I'm hopeful that all things considered, it's a relatively safe drug situation, and that these trials proceed and prove to be very good. This could really make a difference in the world, and I will keep you guys posted on anything I hear about this. Now, real quick, I'm going to touch on a story an article that was published in the Annals of Internal Medicine on November 16th, so yesterday, and the title was "A Possible Sterilizing Cure of HIV-1 Infection Without Stem Cell Transplantation." Now, if you're curious as to what a sterilizing cure means, a sterilizing cure refers to the complete elimination of replication-competent provirus in the body, while a functional cure refers to the long-term control of HIV replication without treatment. So here's the background from the study. I'll read it to you guys. A sterilizing cure of HIV-1 infection has been reported in 2 people living with HIV-1 who underwent allogenic hematopoietic stem cell transplantation from donors who were homozygous for this polymorphism, this particular polymorphism that allows people to evade HIV infection or to fight against the HIV infection naturally and win. So the important takeaways from the results from this publication are that there were no genome intact HIV-1 proviruses detected in analyses of a total of 1.18 billion peripheral blood mononuclear cells and 503 million mononuclear cells from placental tissues. So they basically took it to the limit of our detection to try and find HIV in this person, and they didn't. This is really interesting and really good news in terms of upgrading our fight to HIV. Right now, people are using these sort of long-term treatments that is like a regimen of drug cocktails that combat HIV's many mechanisms of mutation. So this would be a great find if we can study this and better understand how these people are fighting it, how this polymorphism works. Maybe we can create a drug that totally eliminates HIV or drastically reduces it without having to take all these cocktails. It's still a pipe dream. It's kind of far away, but this is a step in the right direction. Now, for the last story, I'm going to make it real quick because I have less than a minute to talk about it. This is the video that you're seeing right now of solar panels in the Taihang solar farm in China. And China is claiming that this reduces the metric tons of carbon emissions per year by 251,000 metric tons. So besides the fact that we have a really hard time recycling solar panels and the fact that they take up a bunch of space, this is kind of a show because China right now has claimed that they're going to be building 150 new nuclear reactors, which for every 1 square mile of a nuclear reactor that produces 1,000 megawatts of energy, you would need 75 times that space in solar panels to produce the same energy, or 360 times the space for wind farms. So nuclear is obviously the most efficient, and I think it's a really great way to produce energy in terms of we know where the waste is, we can contain it, we don't know what to do with it yet, but at least in terms of emissions, all the waste, we're holding on to it. So I'll discuss this more in future episodes. I just want to touch on that and let you guys know what was happening with China and these solar panels and their nuclear reactors. And with that, I want to thank you guys for joining me today. I hope that this helps open up some reasonable discussion with your friends and family and coworkers. And if you enjoyed it, like, subscribe, and share. And now please enjoy this video, and I'll talk to you guys on Friday.